There's something about a boardwalk in the off-season. It stops feeling like part of the town, like it's been abandoned by time itself. The shops are boarded up. The neon signs that once screamed for attention are dead, and the air carries that damp, salty chill that never quite leaves your skin. In the summer, people flood this place. Families, tourists, couples taking slow walks with ice cream cones melting in their hands. But in the colder months, it's just an empty stretch of wood and silence. I liked it that way. Needed it, really. Late night runs became a habit, something I relied on. There's a kind of comfort in repetition, in the steady sound of sneakers hitting wood, in the wind whipping through the gaps between the slats. The rhythm of it all, my breath, my footsteps, the distant crash of the waves, made the world feel smaller, like everything outside of that moment didn't matter. It was my space, my time. I never thought about whether it was safe. Why would I? The whole point was that no one else was supposed to be there. It wasn't a place you'd just stumble into by accident. Not in the dead of night. Not when the cold had driven everyone back into their homes. I knew every inch of that boardwalk, every loose plank, every street lamp that buzzed a little too loud, every spot where the wooden railing had splintered from years of salt and wind. It was familiar, predictable, until it wasn't. It crept in slow like an itch at the back of my mind. Not fear, not yet, just that vague, crawling sense that something wasn't right. Like when you leave the house and halfway down the road you can't shake the thought that you left the stove on. It's not panic, but it lingers. A feeling that hooks itself into you, small but insistent. I didn't stop running, but something inside me was paying attention now, tracking the quiet in a way I hadn't before. The wind had picked up, whistling low through the gaps in the wooden slats. The waves were still crashing in the distance, steady, unbothered. But something had changed. I could feel it before I even turned my head. I glanced back. There was someone under the street lamp, far enough away that I couldn't make out details, but not far enough to ignore. Just standing there, hood up, hands in pockets, facing me. The boardwalk wasn't a place you just passed through this time of year. If you were out here, it was because you meant to be, and standing still like that, not leaning against the railing, not checking a phone, just watching, that wasn't normal. Still, I kept moving. My feet stayed on pace, my breathing stayed even. I told myself it was fine. Just another night, just someone else who needed air, just like me. But the feeling didn't leave. If anything, it settled in deeper. I picked up the pace, shaking off the feeling like a dog trying to shake off rain. It was nothing. Just my mind playing tricks, feeding into its own paranoia. The boardwalk had a way of distorting things at night. The way the light pooled beneath the street lamps. The way the shadows stretched long and unnatural. I forced myself to focus on my breathing, my rhythm, the familiar repetition of my feet against the wood. Another glance over my shoulder. Empty. Just the long stretch of boardwalk behind me. The lamplight flickering against the damp planks. The wind rattling an old sign somewhere in the distance. No one standing there. No shape in the glow of the street lamp. No figure watching. I exhaled hard, almost laughing at myself. Of course, a trick of the light. Maybe. A shadow from the way the lamp hit the railing. My mind taking the empty boardwalk and filling in the gaps with something that wasn't there. I was just tired, that was all. And I almost believed that until I checked again, and he was there. Closer, same stance, same stillness. No movement, no adjustment. Like he had always been that way, like he had never left. Like my mind hadn't erased him for those few moments when I thought I was alone. I felt it then, that first real deep down certainty that something was wrong. I tried to shake it off, tried to focus on the run, on the rhythm that had always been enough to quiet my thoughts. In, out, feet against wood. In, out, keep moving, keep the pace steady. But something was wrong. It wasn't a sound, not at first, more like a feeling, an offbeat sensation at the back of my mind, like a song skipping half a second ahead of itself. The boardwalk had its own rhythm, the groan of wood underfoot, the distant rush of waves, the occasional gust of wind rattling the old storefronts. I knew that rhythm. I had heard it 100 times. But now there was something else. I didn't notice it at first. It slipped in between my own footsteps, just a fraction off, just enough to make my brain hesitate. Then it clicked, a second rhythm, not an echo, not the sound of my own steps bouncing back at me, something else. I stopped. It stopped. Silence, the kind that felt heavier than it should, stretching too long, thick with expectation. Only the waves moved, crashing softly against the shore, as if they hadn't noticed anything was wrong. I told myself I had imagined it, that it was just the way sound traveled out here, how the boardwalk could throw things back at you in strange ways. I told myself not to check. This time, I listened. I didn't look back. I just ran. The boardwalk stretched ahead of me, longer than I remembered. Too long. The exit should have been closer by now. I knew the distance, knew how far I usually ran before turning back, but it felt like I was running in place, like the planks beneath my feet were looping the same few yards over and over. I told myself I was imagining it. That fear was twisting my sense of time. I was moving fast, my lungs were proof of that, burning with every breath, my legs screaming with every step. But it didn't matter how fast I went. I risked a glance back, and he was closer. Too close. Still not moving. Not walking, not running, just standing there, as if he had always been at that distance, as if he hadn't needed to move at all. My breath caught, a sharp, panicked hitch in my throat. The street lamps cast long, thin shadows, warping everything into strange, stretched-out shapes, but I didn't need to see clearly. I knew he was there, knew he was watching. My chest tightened, my body desperate for air, but I didn't stop. I couldn't. I didn't care if my legs gave out. If my lungs failed, I just had to reach the end, just had to get to the car. That was all that mattered. Just get to the car. My hands wouldn't work right. My fingers were clumsy, shaking too hard, slipping against the fabric of my pocket as I fumbled for the keys. Too slow. Every second stretched out, dragging through thick, suffocating panic. I got them, but then they were gone, slipping from my grasp, bouncing against the wood, nearly vanishing between the planks. A strangled sound pushed past my throat as I dropped to my knees, scraping blindly in the dark, breath coming too fast, too shallow. Found them, snatched them up, nearly dropped them again as I lurched to my feet. The car, just get in the car. The lights flashed as I hit the button. I yanked the door open, threw myself inside, slammed it shut so hard the whole frame rattled. Lock the doors, start the engine. The motions felt sluggish, like I was moving through water, but finally the car roared to life. I didn't breathe until I threw it into reverse. My eyes flicked up. He was there, standing right where I had just been, not running, not lunging, not reacting at all, just there. Same stance, same stillness. Hood low, face swallowed in shadow, like nothing had changed, like I hadn't just run for my life. I didn't wait. Didn't try to process it, didn't think, I just drove. I don't even remember the drive home. Just flashes, my hands clenched too tight on the wheel, the speedometer needle climbing higher than it should, the dark stretch of empty road swallowing my headlights. I must have run lights, must have taken turns too fast. I didn't care. The only thought looping in my head was getting as much distance as possible between me and that boardwalk. Home, finally. I killed the engine, sat there for a moment, fingers stiff, breath ragged. My house had never felt so far from the street, the walkway stretching too long in the dark. But I forced myself out, made it inside, locked the door behind me. Then I checked. Twice. 3 times. 4. Every lock, every window, even the ones I never bothered with before. The curtains shut, lights off. Like that would help. But sleep didn't come. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw him, not chasing, not moving, just there, standing where he shouldn't be. Street lamps casting long shadows behind him. That hood, that face I never really saw, but somehow knew I didn't want to. I kept telling myself it was just some guy, some weird, messed up coincidence. That if I had stayed, if I had called out, he would have spoken, given me some normal, mundane reason for standing there like that. But I haven't run the boardwalk since, and I don't think I ever will. I think about those summers a lot, the ones spent at my grandparents' place in Saltmarsh Bay. It all feels distant now, like a half-remembered fever dream. Those endless sunburnt days, the boardwalk's sticky heat clinging to my skin, the way the ocean air mixed with the smell of fried food and sunscreen. The house was always full, crowded with aunts, uncles, cousins, the noise bouncing off the old wooden walls. But it never felt suffocating. It was a good kind of noise, a safe kind. But that year, God, that year was different. I try to tell myself I'm imagining it, that it's just hindsight twisting things, but I know something was off. The air sat heavier. The town felt wrong, like it was holding its breath. Everyone was distracted, jittery. The hurricane had everyone on edge. A bad one, supposedly. People talked about it in quiet, serious tones, reinforcing windows, stacking sandbags like they were fortifying against something worse than a storm. The town built up these massive sand dunes along the shore as a barrier. They loomed over everything, changing the landscape in a way that didn't feel right. The beach was supposed to be open, endless, but now it was blocked, walled off like a prison yard. I don't know if anyone else felt it, or if it was just me. Maybe I was too young to put it into words then, but I knew something wasn't right. The way people moved, the way they looked at the water, like it held a secret they didn't want to acknowledge. I remember standing on the boardwalk, staring at those dunes and feeling small, like something was watching from the other side. I don't remember deciding to leave. There wasn't some grand plan. I just needed to get out. The house had felt too loud, too thick with something I couldn't name. Maybe it was just the weight of too many people crammed into one place, the way the air in there carried arguments and laughter, and the smell of dinner in a way that made everything feel too close. Maybe it was something else. I don't know. I don't even remember what set me off. A stupid fight with one of my brothers. Probably. It didn't matter. I just knew I needed air. I slipped out without thinking about it. The back sliding door barely made a sound. I'd seen my older cousins sneak in and out enough times to know how to do it without getting caught. It was muscle memory. I didn't even put shoes on. The wooden deck was still warm under my feet, the heat from the day lingering like a ghost. I thought I'd see people. The boardwalk never really emptied, not even after the lifeguards packed up and the tourists went back to their rentals. There were always locals lingering, old men smoking, kids like me riding their bikes, couples walking too slow soaking in the salt air. But that night, it was just me. I remember stopping, looking around, waiting for someone to break the silence. But there was nothing, just the distant crash of waves, hidden behind those towering dunes. The lights from the houses along the street looked dimmer than usual. Porch lights were on, but no voices carried from them. No movement, no music drifting out of an open window. The emptiness stretched, long and wrong. I wasn't sure if I liked it. I don't know how long I walked before I saw it. Maybe 10 minutes. Maybe less. Time gets slippery when I think back on it. I remember the feel of the boardwalk under my feet. The worn planks, the occasional gust of wind lifting grains of sand into the air. I wasn't really looking for anything. I wasn't thinking about much at all. Just moving, stretching out the silence, trying to shake the weird feeling that had settled in my chest since I stepped outside. Then I saw the smoke. It was thin, barely there at first, just a single dark thread against the fading sky. But I knew what it was. Even as a kid, I knew the difference between fog rolling in and the slow, curling breath of something still smoldering. Fires on the beach weren't exactly rare. People did it all the time, even though it wasn't allowed. Usually you'd hear them before you saw them. Drunk voices, the occasional burst of laughter, the low hum of music from some portable speaker. Fires meant people, but this one didn't. No sound, no flickering light, just smoke, rising slow and lazy, like it had been burning for a while, like whoever lit it had already walked away. I stopped. Something about it. It just didn't sit right. Maybe it was the way the dunes loomed in front of it, making it feel hidden, cut off from everything. Maybe it was the silence. The way the boardwalk felt abandoned, like the whole town had packed up and left without telling me. I should have turned around. I know that now. I think I knew it then too, but I didn't. Climbing the dunes was harder than I expected. I thought I could just walk up, but the sand slipped under my feet, pulling me down a little with every step. The wind had picked up too, sending loose grains into my face, stinging my skin. I remember thinking, why am I doing this? Why am I making this harder on myself? But I kept going. Maybe it was just stubbornness, or maybe it was that weird, unsettled feeling gnawing at me, the part of my brain that wouldn't let me just leave it alone. By the time I reached the top, I was already second-guessing everything. From up there, the beach stretched out in both directions, empty, no people, no movement, just the ocean, dark and restless, and the fire below still smoldering, glowing faintly under the deepening sky, and yet there was no one around. No footprints, no scattered beer bottles or backpacks, no signs that anyone had been there at all, just that fire like it had started itself. I slid down the dune, feeling the sand rush under me, and stepped closer. The smell hit me first, something sharp, bitter, not just wood smoke, but something else, something that made my stomach twist. And then I saw what was in the ashes. Not just burnt driftwood, not just scraps of charred debris. Clothes, little clothes. A sock, still mostly intact, half buried in the sand. A shoe, blackened on one side but still whole enough to recognize. Fabric burned away at the edges, but not gone. I crouched down without thinking, my fingers closing around a stick, nudging at the pile, pushing through the ashes like I was searching for some kind of explanation. That's when I saw it. The photograph, half burned, edges curling in blackened waves, the paper warped from heat. Most of it was gone, but the middle had survived just enough. Enough to see a face. A boy. My breath caught. He wasn't just any kid. He looked like me. Not exactly, but close enough that if someone told me he was a cousin, I wouldn't question it. The shape of his face, the angle of his eyes. It was wrong. It made no sense. My chest felt tight, like I couldn't get a deep breath in. The fire cracked softly, embers shifting, like something still alive. I should have run. I should have left it alone. But I just stood there, staring at that boy's face, feeling something heavy settle in the pit of my stomach. I almost didn't see it. The wind had picked up, shifting the sand, burying and unburying little things. A scorched button, a sliver of something plastic, the last remnants of whatever had been burned here. But then, something caught the edge of my vision. Something small and torn, fluttering weakly against the ground. A scrap of paper. I bent down, careful not to touch the still warm embers around it. The edges were burnt, curling inward like dried petals. Most of it was gone, blackened into nothing. But in the center, where the fire had hesitated, there was still writing. Faded, barely visible through the damage. Just a few words left. "Don't let him see you." I stared at it, the words crawling under my skin. What the hell did that mean? Who wrote this? And why leave it here like some kind of warning, half swallowed by the fire? I don't know what I would have done if I had more time. If I had stayed there longer. If I had thought it through. If I had let myself process it. Maybe I would have dug through the ashes more, looked for something else, some clue to make this make sense. Maybe I would have just backed away, shaken the whole thing off, convinced myself it was nothing. But I didn't get that chance, because that's when I noticed him. Down the beach, past the dunes, close to the water. At first, I thought he was some drunk, some lost tourist wandering too close to the shoreline. But then he stopped. He wasn't moving. Just standing there, half hidden in the thickening fog, his body still in that way that people shouldn't be. Not swaying, not adjusting his stance, not looking around, just still. I couldn't see his face, but even from a distance, I felt it. His eyes, on me. He moved. Not fast at first, more like a stumble, like his legs weren't fully awake yet. Like something had kept him still for too long and now he was shaking it off. But that didn't last. The hesitation burned off quick, replaced by something else. Something deliberate, something wrong. I should have run. That thought is the one that sticks with me the most. I should have moved the second I saw him. The second I felt his eyes on me. But my body lagged behind my brain, stuck in that awful frozen moment where nothing made sense. Then he got closer, and I could see him. His head was bare, bald in a way that didn't look natural. His skin was pale, almost waxy in the dim light, but it was the way his clothes hung off him that sent my nerves sparking too loose, like they belonged to someone else, or like he had been wearing them for too long, letting them sag, stretch, shift over him in ways they shouldn't. Something in me finally caught up. I turned, bolted. The sand made it harder than I thought it would. Each step dragged, sinking, stealing momentum. I could hear him behind me, closer than he should have been, given how fast I thought I was moving. And worse, I could hear his voice. Not a yell, not a scream, something between a demand and a slur. The words slurred together, thick and wrong. My brain didn't register what he was saying, and maybe that was better. Maybe I wasn't supposed to. The dunes were ahead. My hands hit them first, yanking myself up, scrambling, kicking at loose sand. I was almost over when I felt it. Fingernails, dragging across my ankle. Sharp enough to feel through the fabric, to scrape against skin. Not quite a grip, not strong enough to hold, but enough to make me feel it. Somehow I kicked free. I don't know how. I didn't stop to think about it. I just kept going. I reached home somehow. My legs ached, my breath still ragged, but the worst part was the shaking. It wouldn't stop. My hands, my shoulders, like my body was still trying to run even though I was already inside. The door locked behind me. I should have told someone. I should have. But I didn't. Not that night. Not ever. It wasn't just the fear of getting in trouble for sneaking out. It wasn't just the fact that I had no real way of explaining any of it. It was something else. Something worse. What if no one believed me? What if they did? How would I even say it out loud? A fire nearly burned out. Clothes in the ashes like they belonged to someone who never came back for them. A photograph, half destroyed, but clear enough to show a face that felt too familiar. And a man wrong in a way I still can't put into words. I kept waiting for something. A sign that what I saw had been real. News reports. Missing person flyers. Police on the beach the next morning, combing through the sand, picking up the pieces of something they had no way of understanding. But nothing came. No one talked about a fire. No one mentioned a man. No one seemed to have seen anything at all. Like none of it ever happened. But I know it did. I know it did. I don't even remember why I went for a run that night. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe just routine. Summers down the shore could be brutal, so I usually ran early in the morning or late at night, times when the boardwalk was empty, when I didn't have to dodge tourists and sunburnt families. Something about those late-night runs always felt better. Just me, the ocean, the stretch of wooden planks under my feet. No distractions, no heat, just movement. The off-season has its own kind of silence. The kind that presses in, makes everything feel just a little bit heavier. The boardwalk, so crowded just weeks earlier, is practically abandoned, save for the occasional local taking a smoke break outside a closed-up bar. It's something I usually enjoy, that eerie calm, but for some reason that night, it feels different. Not in any obvious way, nothing I can point to, nothing worth turning back for. Just a vague sense, a nagging wrongness at the edge of my mind. I shake it off, focus on my breathing, the steady slap of my sneakers against the wood. That's the thing about running. You can lose yourself in it if you let go of everything else. And for a while I do. Then I hear it. A faint, metallic clink. It's small, barely noticeable over the sound of the wind and the distant waves, but it snaps me out of my rhythm. My stomach tightens. Instinctively I reach for my pocket. It's empty. My stomach drops. My hand pats at my pocket. Once, twice, nothing. It doesn't make sense. I had them when I left. I always had them when I ran. Non-negotiable rule in my house. Lock the door, keep your keys on you. No exceptions. My parents drilled that into me since I was a kid, so forgetting them wasn't even something I'd consider. But now my pocket is empty, and my keys are just gone. I crouch down, pressing my hands against the worn wooden planks, trying to peer through the gaps. Useless. Just darkness, an endless black void underneath the boardwalk. Even with the dim glow from the occasional street lamp, I can't see anything down there. Just the faintest suggestion of movement, shifting shadows, wind stirring up sand. but nothing solid, nothing helpful. A deep breath. Think. I replay the sound in my head. That metallic clink. It wasn't loud, just enough to register over the rhythmic pounding of my footsteps. They must have slipped through the cracks. There's no other explanation. I swallow, forcing myself to stay calm. But the weight of the problem settles in. Going home without them isn't an option. My parents would lose their minds. And even beyond that, the idea of just leaving them behind, of walking away from something that belongs to me, feels wrong. It's not just the inconvenience, it's the principle. You don't just abandon something that's yours, not without at least trying to get it back. And so, without really thinking it through, I step off the boardwalk and head toward the sand. I jump down onto the sand, landing harder than I expect. My foot sinks slightly, the ground softer than I thought, and before I can even take a breath, the smell hits. Rotten seaweed, stale beer, something else. It's thick, almost clinging to my skin, the kind of stench that makes you want to breathe through your mouth. But that doesn't help much either. I swallow against the sour taste of it, blinking as my eyes adjust to the dark. It's worse down here than I thought. The boardwalk above blocks most of the light, leaving only thin streaks from the street lamps in the distance. My watch has a tiny backlight, but it's pathetic. Barely does anything except cast weird, shifting shadows along the sand. I take a step, and something crunches under my shoe. Garbage, plastic wrappers, old cups, bits of driftwood. The ground is uneven, damp in patches, like the ocean had reached up earlier in the day and decided to leave something behind. Every step kicks up more of that awful smell. I tell myself it's fine. I'll find the keys. They have to be here. I know the exact spot where I was running. They couldn't have gone far, but the longer I search, the more something gnaws at me. Doubt. They should be right here. They should be, but they aren't. My fingers brush against something solid beneath the sand. For a split second, relief surges through me. The keys, finally. But when I pull them up, I feel it instantly. Wrong weight, wrong shape. Not mine. In the dim glow of my watch, I see them clearly. A different set of keys. Old, rusted. The kind of corrosion that only comes from years of exposure to salt and dampness. The metal is rough under my fingertips, flaking slightly as I turn them over. Some of the keys are bent, their labels worn down to nothing. There's a keychain attached, barely recognizable, just a twisted loop of metal, and something that might have been plastic once. I stare at them, trying to make sense of it. They shouldn't mean anything, just someone else's lost keys. Could be anyone's. Could have been dropped here years ago, forgotten, buried under shifting sand. But they do mean something. I just know they do. The thought lodges itself in my brain, refusing to budge, because if these have been here long enough to rust, that means whoever lost them never came back for them. The keys sit heavy in my palm, like they're carrying something with them. A story I don't want to know. I don't even realize I'm holding my breath until the silence shifts, just the slightest movement in the dark, something shifting where nothing should be. I refuse to walk away. Not yet. I tell myself it's about the keys, that I just need to be smarter about where I'm looking. That's all. Just a stupid mistake dragging out longer than it should. The rusted keys in my pocket feel heavier now, their presence nagging at me in a way I can't explain. I push the thought away. Focus. If I just line things up right, I'll find mine. That's all this is. A frustrating detour. Nothing more. I kneel, fingers trembling slightly as I untie one of my shoelaces. I hold it for a second longer than I should. It's such a simple plan. Drop it through the boards. Watch where it lands. Line up my search. Easy. The lace dangles, pale in the darkness, swaying slightly. The air is still no wind. Then it yanks downward. A hard, sudden pull. A force that shouldn't be there. It's gone. I don't move. Don't even breathe. My brain stalls, scrambling for an answer that makes sense. The wind. No. I already know there's no wind. A trick of movement. No. I was completely still. I stare at the gap between the boards. The space where my shoelace should still be. The place where it just vanished. A rush of cold crawls up my spine. Something deep and instinctive. That primal kind of wrong that doesn't need an explanation. I should leave, now, but my keys are still missing, and somewhere beneath the boardwalk I am not alone. Every nerve in my body tells me to leave. Now, I shift my weight trying to stand, but I pause. Not because I want to, but because I hear it. Shuffling, soft at first, almost like the wind moving through the beams. But then again, a different spot. Then another, not one person, multiple. I swallow hard, trying to tell myself it's just my own movement echoing, bouncing off the wood, but I don't believe it. Something's down here. I move carefully now, stepping backward, keeping low. The sand shifts under me, wet and uneven. The air feels thick, heavier than before. Then, a hand clamps around my ankle. I don't register it at first, just pressure, cold, wrong. Then fingernails dig in, pressing past the skin, clamping like a vice. My breath leaves me in a sharp, choked noise. Not the wind, not my imagination. Someone is here, and they're holding on. I yank my leg. It doesn't budge. I kick, twisting, trying to shake free, but the grip tightens. I don't think. I just slam my foot forward. There's a thud, a sharp, muffled sound. I feel something give, a wrist, a face. I don't know. The grip loosens. I don't wait. My body moves before my brain can catch up. I shove myself forward, my hands digging into the sand, my knees scraping against something sharp, but I don't stop. I don't look back. I just crawl, push, drag myself out from under the boardwalk. The second I hit open air, I bolt. Every step feels slower than it should be, like something is dragging at me, but I don't stop. My breath is ragged, my legs burning, but I don't stop. Not until I see my house. For days I convince myself it's over. It has to be. I don't know what happened under the boardwalk, but I got out. I'm fine. I never found my keys, but I don't care anymore. I don't go back. I make up a lie about losing them somewhere else. My parents are pissed, but it's better than trying to explain. I tell myself it was nothing. A fluke, my mind playing tricks on me. And for a while I almost believe it. Then, 3 days later, loud knocking. I jolt awake, heart hammering. It's too early, too deliberate. Not the wind rattling the door. Not a package delivery. Someone is knocking. I wait, straining to hear my parents moving around, but the house stays silent. No footsteps, no voices. Eventually I force myself up. I check the hallway, empty. Their bedroom door is closed. Still asleep. They didn't hear it. The knocking doesn't come again. But when I open the door, no one is there. Just the street, empty in the early morning dimness. Cold air creeping in. The porch quiet and still. I exhale, about to close the door. But something stops me. A feeling, a weight in the air. And then I see it. Right there on the doormat, my missing shoelace. Placed neatly, coiled into a perfect little loop, like a gift, like a message, or maybe like a warning. It was one of those nights that felt like it could stretch on forever. We had been out on the beach for hours, talking, drinking, letting the bonfire burn down to nothing but glowing embers. The others were ready to crash. But I wasn't. There was something about the air, the salty breeze, the distant sound of waves, the way the boardwalk stretched out under dim streetlights, that made me want to stay out just a little longer. The Bayshore boardwalk was empty. Not just quiet, empty. The kind of empty that made me second-guess my own footsteps, made them sound too loud, like I was disturbing something that had settled in the silence. Shops were shut, the last few neon signs buzzing faintly, as if they had given up for the night. I don't know what I was expecting. Maybe I thought walking it off would help me shake the lingering buzz, clear my head. Maybe I just wasn't ready for the night to end. I kept walking, my mind drifting, lulled by the rhythmic creak of wooden planks beneath my shoes. But after a while an entirely different feeling settled in, something far more immediate. I needed to find a bathroom. I hadn't even noticed how bad until the thought hit me, and suddenly it was all I could think about. That's when I saw it. Off to the side, tucked near an old boarded-up snack stand, was a public restroom. The kind that looked like it had been there for decades, barely maintained, probably avoided by anyone who had a better option. The lights above the entrance flickered, casting an unsteady glow on the sand-dusted pavement. It looked disgusting, but at that moment it didn't matter. I just needed to get in and out. I hesitated for just a second before stepping inside. The second I stepped inside, I knew I had made a mistake. The smell hit me first. A sharp sting of bleach, so strong it burned the back of my throat. But there was something else beneath it. Something that bleach hadn't fully erased. Rote. It wasn't fresh, but it was there, lingering in the air like a memory of something that should have been scrubbed away but never really was. The lights overhead buzzed and flickered, throwing long, jittery shadows across the cracked tile floor. It made everything feel unsteady, like the room itself was shifting in and out of focus. The walls were stained, dark blotches creeping up from the floor like old water damage or something worse. The mirrors above the sinks were covered in streaks, reflecting warped versions of the empty space behind me. The whole place had the feeling of something abandoned, left to decay but never fully forgotten. I should have just walked out, held it until I got back. But I had already pushed through the door, and I knew I wouldn't make it much farther without regretting it. So I did what I had to. I headed straight for the back. There was something about choosing the farthest stall that felt safer, though I don't know why. Maybe it was instinct. Put as much distance as possible between myself and whatever was lingering in the air. Or maybe I just wanted to be out of sight, even if I was the only one there. The floor was damp under my shoes as I stepped inside. I didn't think about why. I just shut the stall door behind me and tried to get this over with as fast as possible. As I finished pulling the door to my stall closed, something caught my eye. It was the stall next to mine, shut tight, but I don't know why it made me pause. Maybe it was just the way the door was off-center, or how the flickering light above it seemed to hesitate as if trying to shine more clearly on that particular spot. Something about the way it sat there, waiting, felt wrong. Out of habit, I bent down to check beneath the door just to see if anyone was in there. No feet, nothing, just the grimy tile floor stretching into the shadows. It wasn't a big deal, at least not at first. It could have just been empty, a stall that no one had used. But then, just as I straightened up, I heard it. A click. The sound wasn't much, just a soft noise like metal shifting against metal, but it was enough to make me freeze. My heart skipped. The locked stall door, it shifted. Just a little, but it was enough to make my mind race. I don't know why, but I couldn't help myself. I had to look. I cautiously leaned toward the crack between the door and the frame, just enough to peek inside. It was empty, completely empty, except the toilet seat was up, and the water inside the bowl, it was still untouched. Something about that felt so wrong, like whoever had been in there, or whatever had been in there, had left too abruptly. There was no sign anyone had actually used it, no fresh paper, no signs of anyone having been in the room at all, just that eerie stillness. I don't know why, but I quickly looked away and forced myself to move on. I told myself it was just a dirty, neglected bathroom. That's all. I didn't need to think about it. I didn't want to. I was trying to hurry up. My mind was already somewhere else, pushing me to finish, to just get out of there. The whole place felt off, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, even though I had no reason to think that. I mean, it was just a bathroom, right? Just a bathroom on an empty boardwalk. But still, the air felt heavy, almost too thick, and my thoughts kept racing. Just as I was zipping up, I heard it, the creak of the bathroom door. Someone had entered. I froze. My heart hammered for a second, but I shook it off. Maybe it was just another late-night wanderer, a guy looking for a place to pee. But the footsteps weren't what I expected. They didn't just head for the nearest stall. They circled the room, slow, measured steps that seemed to pause, then resume, as if whoever it was just taking their time, moving around the space like they had all the time in the world. It wasn't normal. At one point, it even sounded like there were multiple sets of footsteps. I couldn't quite tell, but the echoes seemed to come from different directions at once. One moment, they were coming from near the sinks, then further back toward the stalls, then back near the door. There was no rhythm to it, no steady pattern, just the strange movement of someone or something making its way around. And then silence, absolute silence. It was the kind of silence that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. I couldn't hear breathing, couldn't hear a shuffle of feet, couldn't even hear the flicker of the lights above. It was like the whole room had paused with me, holding its breath. Whoever had entered had stopped near the sinks, but they hadn't turned on the water. No rustling, no sounds of them reaching for paper towels, just stillness. A stillness that felt heavy, like something was waiting. I could feel it, and I couldn't explain why, but I knew I wasn't alone. I couldn't get out fast enough. I rushed toward the stall door, ready to just put this place behind me, but when I tried to push it open, it wouldn't budge. My fingers gripped the latch, but the door didn't move. It was as if someone was holding it shut from the outside, as if they had been waiting for me to try and leave. I felt the panic rise in my chest, the sense that something was wrong flooding through me. The air in the bathroom felt thicker now, as if I was suffocating, trapped in some strange, unreal situation. I shoved against the door again, harder this time, my palms slick with sweat. I pressed my shoulder into it, feeling the old wood groan under the pressure, but it still wouldn't give. I couldn't think straight anymore. My chest was tight, and my heart was pounding so loudly I could barely hear anything else. But then something else, something cold and unsettling, crept into my awareness. I felt it. Someone was there. It wasn't just a thought, it was a presence, a weight in the air. I could feel it just beyond the door, like eyes were fixed on me. The adrenaline hit me then, making my muscles surge with urgency. I backed up a step and slammed my shoulder into the door with everything I had. The door finally gave way, the wood creaking in protest as I stumbled forward into the bathroom. It was empty, not even a sign of anyone, just the same filthy bathroom, the same flickering lights, and that horrible smell that still hung in the air. I didn't even think. I just moved toward the exit, my heart racing, desperate to get out of that place. But when I reached the main door, my hand wrapped around the handle, ready to leave. I felt it. It was locked. I tried turning it. Nothing. It was like someone had locked me in from the outside. My stomach dropped, a cold pit opening up in my gut. I couldn't breathe, and then just behind me, I heard it. A soft shift of weight, like someone had just moved, standing up from somewhere. I didn't need to turn around to know. I could feel them. They were close. Too close. I was out of time. I couldn't stay in that bathroom any longer. I had to get out. My eyes frantically searched the room, darting from corner to corner, looking for any escape. And then, there it was, a small, grimy window high up near the ceiling. It wasn't much, but it was the only way out. I didn't think about how dangerous it might be. I didn't care, I just moved. I rushed toward the sink beneath the window, hoping it would hold. I could already feel it creaking under my weight, like it might give way at any second, but there was no time to think about that. I had to get through the window. I scrambled up, trying to shove the stiff window open. It resisted at first, but with a grunt, I managed to break it loose. The rush of cool air hit me, and I started to climb through. But then, just as I was halfway out, I heard it. A loud, sudden movement. The stall door behind me slammed open with such force that I nearly lost my balance. I whipped my head around, and that's when I saw him. A man, standing in the stall. He was thin, too thin, with a gaunt face that looked like it hadn't seen sunlight in years. His hair was wild, sticking up in odd directions, like he hadn't bothered to tame it for days or months. But it wasn't just his face that made my stomach turn. His skin was sickly pale, almost translucent, like something that had been left to rot for too long. And his clothes, too small, too childish, too unnatural for his frame. They looked like they didn't belong to him at all. And then he stared. No movement. He just stood there, looking straight at me with eyes that didn't blink. I couldn't breathe. I didn't wait for him to do anything. My mind screamed at me to move. Without thinking, I scrambled the rest of the way through the window, my knees scraping painfully against the edge. I crashed onto the boardwalk below, the impact jarring through my bones, but I didn't care. I was already running, stumbling away as fast as I could, until the sounds of that bathroom, of him, were far behind me. I ran. My legs burned and my breath was ragged, but I didn't stop until I was far enough away from that bathroom, from the thing in there. My brain was a mess of thoughts, but I knew I had to get to safety. I pulled out my phone, hands shaking, and dialed the police. They came fast. Thankfully, it was a small beach town and they didn't have much else to do at this hour. But by the time they showed up and made their way to the bathroom, the man was already gone. I showed them the bathroom, pointed to the window I had climbed through, the door I'd tried to force open. I kept telling them how I'd felt someone behind me, how the door had been stuck, how I knew I wasn't alone. One of the officers nodded, but his expression was blank, like he didn't know what to make of it. Then he bent down, examining the door handle. He didn't say much, but his face turned serious as he pointed out the deep scratches. Someone had tried to mess with it. It wasn't just in my head. Someone had been actively trying to keep me inside that bathroom. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut, and I could feel that cold fear come rushing back. But there were no cameras on the boardwalk, no witnesses, no trace of the man. The officers searched the area, but it was late, and there was nothing at all. They told me to be careful, but that was it. I was on my own. The next morning, I left town. I couldn't stay there, couldn't stay near that boardwalk, near that bathroom. There were too many questions, too many things I couldn't explain, and I knew I would never get answers. I still wonder sometimes who or what was waiting for me in that stall.